I am not around children as much as I have been historically this time of year, but like I feel like I'm hearing from more and more people that they're getting sick earlier. Like
Yeah.
people have been out the
Oh,
first couple weeks of school this year. So like I don't know what's going on with that, but
I have been trying to test kids between me and myself and the other SLP at my job, trying to test kids, and I could not test a single child this week because they were all gone.
just from like
Yeah,
like colds and
general
stuff. The
general illness.
the
Yeah, it's
school
going
year
around.
ick.
Absolutely. Pneumonia's been big this year. Um,
Ew.
it's been whack. So anyways, yeah. No,
Wow.
I woke up the other day and my eye was like bright pink and I was like, "Oh dear God."
Yeah.
It is the 3rd week of school. It is too early for this. It was just allergies. Allergy eye drops fixed all of my problems. But I
That's
did have a
good.
moment where I was like, I don't appreciate this. No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thanks."
My immune system really is that girl. Like I don't get sick very much now. Like
Mm-mm.
and I think just because like working with kids, you're just exposed to germs constantly and you just get really good at fighting off the little stuff.
You
But
just do. I was at a wedding recently, and the entire bridal party, with the exception of myself and another person who works in the schools, all got COVID.
yeah,
And myself and the like, school counselor high-fived and said, "Thank you to the petri dishes that we work in because we've now got super strength immune systems." So, oh dear
I will
goodness.
say I say that and then I get COVID about every 14
Every
months. So
you do.
which
You
I
do.
should not be laughing at because I'm actually terrified that I won't be able to get the vaccine booster this year and then I'm going to get it and get it really bad and then get long COVID. And I don't want that to happen either.
No.
So it's just going to be a lot of hoping
Yeah.
and washing hands and sanitizing
Mhm.
and hoping for the best.
Absolutely. Welcome to Tell Me About It, a podcast by SLPs for everybody. My name is Francie.
And my name is Maggie.
And today we are concluding and rounding out the back to school episode series that we have been doing, and we're culminating with the IEP. So after you've held your eligibility and you now have determined that your child qualifies for services, you have 30 days to hold their very first IEP meeting. And there is a whole long list of people who will attend. There's a whole long list of procedures that we will talk about. And then the fun part is every year after, you do it again. This happens once a year, sometimes more. You are always welcome to request an IEP meeting as often and as frequently as you feel like it. Usually it is done at least once a year.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it. Let's dive into the magic of an IEP meeting. Maggie?
Yes.
Wanna...
Yeah. Well, and I think that you actually saying the part about it being like an annual thing made me think of something that I feel like I've seen online and also experienced in real life is that like once a year you will meet as a whole team to go over the IEP document and make changes to it. I've seen a lot of parents online advocate for having multiple, like air quotes, IEP meetings per year. And what I think that they're referring to is just meeting with your child's IEP team and discussing things. So like that in my brain doesn't actually like quote unquote count as an IEP meeting because what you are doing is discussing, which is important. You're chatting with your team, making sure you're all on the same page, updating information as needed, but you're not going through rewriting goals, updating like primary information, talking about the year ahead, that kind of thing. Because these documents are written very purposefully to be kind of like good for a year. So like we as professionals are looking forward to like what is kind of an attainable goal based on what we know about the child, like what's a realistic goal within the course of a year. Where are they going to be academically in about a year? What kind of things are they going to be learning, looking forward to? So having a bunch of those meetings in the course of a school year doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is totally appropriate to like meet with the team and discuss, make sure you're on the same page. advocate for your
Absolutely.
kiddo. Yeah.
You can call a meeting anytime that you feel like we need to readdress accommodations, modifications, which are a part of an IEP, whether you need to address supports for your child, or yeah, if you meet a goal, you can always amend. That's the great thing about an IEP. It is a living document. It can change whenever the team feels like and has the data to support it needing to change. And so when you attend your IEP meeting, what this kind of looks like. We'll walk you through kind of the general process and what that kind of looks like. So you will come to the school. If you're doing it in person, these can also be held virtually over the phone through a video system like Google Meet or Zoom. And you will join the IEP team. Usually this includes, and this has to include a regular education teacher. This has to include somebody who can, the specific wording is interpret the evaluation results. And you have to have the LEA or the local educational agency or a representative from the local educational agency.
Yeah.
Usually this is a principal, a process coordinator, it can be a school counselor. You want to comment on that, Maggie?
Yeah, I was just looking out to make sure, local education agency. And you know why? I had to look it up because I have like crime procedural television brain rot where they talk about like, oh, the Leos, like the local
That's a law enforcement agency.
Local law enforcement agency or whatever. Because I love Criminal Minds, and so whenever I try to define LEA, I'm like local law enforcement or whatever. I'm like, no,
no.
Yeah, get Spencer Reed out of my head. But
I was gonna say, sorry, Dr. Spencer Reed is not a part of the IEP process.
Unfortunately
for all of us.
Sad day.
So no, but your LEA or your local educational agency, so the principal or somebody who's representing the school will be there. I'm trying to think of others. There's other required media or members for like initial IEPs, and it's usually has to do with diagnostics, like somebody who can like interpret diagnostics and evaluations. And
yes, so we had the LEA and person who is qualified to interpret results, and this is just for the initial.
Mm-hmm.
The classroom teacher has to be there. The special education teacher, I believe, also has to be there. And sometimes these people can serve dual purposes. And so, or like kind of serve in a dual role. So like a lot of times for initial IEPs, you and I, like the SLPs, we will be listed as like speech pathologist and person qualified to interpret results of testing because we're the ones who did the testing and wrote the report on it.
We're so right. It's 5 people. It's the parents, it's a reg ed teacher, it's a special education teacher, it's somebody who can interpret the evaluation results in an LEA. We were right. We should trust ourselves more.
Yes. Well, and because it can be different too. And so for the initial, it's a little bit different than like subsequent LEA or subsequent IEP meetings. Oh boy, are we going to get lost in acronym land again?
Sure are.
Yeah. But yeah, so once you have those 5 people gathered, what should one expect going into an initial meeting?
You're also going to see team members that are not required there. That's when your OTs, your PTs, your SLPs, your vision specialists, your orientation and mobility people, and also anybody with whom the family would like to bring, or other, if the district would like to have a consult, maybe with like, for us, the Department of Mental Health sometimes comes in, or Department of like disability services or community disability resources come in too, can be a part of the team, but they are not the required members. And then also parents can bring whomever they would like. They can bring an advocate, they can bring just an emotional support friend, whomever else. So those are typically the people that you will see in the room. When you sit down, very first thing that they're going to do is they're going to hand you 2 documents, and they are the Parent Bill of Rights and the Procedural Safeguards. These are, you are going to get so many of these through your time in special education. They are offered all the time. It is part of just making sure you know your rights, and we are providing you and making sure that you are aware of your rights as we go through this process. And I once had a parent, and it has stuck with me ever since, say, please don't hand these to me. I have enough to wallpaper a whole house. And I think about that all the time. You will be offered them every single time.
We are legally required. Like we have to offer them. you do not have to take them, or you can take them once and then not take them again because you already have them. They're also freely available online.
If you want an
But
emailed version, if you could say, can you just email them to me? I'm happy to email them to
yeah,
you.
because I think the procedural safeguards, I think it's like a 40-page document.
Oh, it's ginormous.
Yeah, it's really big. And so if you are a parent who has had kind of several IEP meetings, you might have several copies of this. And so you don't have to take it every time. A lot of people ask, they're like, I already have this. And we're like, we have to offer these
ask.
to you.
Yeah. Sorry, you know how this goes. We have to provide these, or we have to at least offer them to you.
Yeah.
There will be a sign-up sheet that goes around just to say who was in attendance that day, and also that you sometimes there's a signature to say that yes, you were offered your procedural safeguards and parent bill of rights, and then you launch into the meeting. And they will hand you a big stack of papers that has tons of little text boxes on it, and you will go through that, usually from top to bottom, hopefully with some paraphrasing if your team can paraphrase. I've been in IEP meetings where they read them verbatim.
Yeah, I think this is pretty team dependent and like situation dependent too, because I have not had this particular experience, but I've had coworkers that have been in DESE,
like compliance, like due processy type situations.
yeah, like a due
process,
processy, and they will truly go line by line and discuss every word that is written, and that is because these IEPs are legal documents. It's like a contract of some. It's not a contract, but
it kind of is, though.
Yeah.
These are the services that the school is saying that they will provide in order to make sure that your child has access to a free and appropriate public education. We're going back to FAPE. Is it?
Oh yeah.
And so this is what we as a district are saying. This is what we are offering. These are the services that we, with you as the parents, are collaborating to make sure that we are all on the same page about the care for your child here at school. And so it is kind of contractually obligated, and also we are legally bound to these services. And so in a lot of ways, it is kind of like a contract.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good way of putting it. And so like it is, yeah, these meetings can tend to be very formal feeling. Like it can feel very kind of sanitary and legal. And the reason for that is that it is like kind of a serious meeting. Like we want to make sure that everything is crystal clear to the members involved. It doesn't always end up that way, which is unfortunate. Because there's also a lot of jargon and a lot of specific processes that kind of can get glossed over by the professionals in the meetings, because we do this all day, every day. And so sometimes it can be hard as like just an outside individual who has a different job, just doesn't do this, to sit there and be like, wait, why are we talking about, whether or not my student is blind? Like, that's not what we're here for, so.
Absolutely. And so it's easy for us to kind of get into these ruts of kind of running through the legal, but it does have that like very sanitized, you're right, that's a good word for it, air to it sometimes, because it is something that we take very seriously. And so I had a thought. Where was I going with it? Usually, and we'll talk about all aspects of your education. And so an IEP, an individualized education plan, will help to, in the creation of it with you as the parents, or whomever, legal guardians, whatnot, will come together to talk about ways that we can modify the curriculum so that your child has greater access to it. And so with that, usually kind of, I'm thinking through, the reason why I'm kind of moving my hands up and down if you're watching the video of this is because I'm thinking through how the document goes. Oftentimes on the very first page, it will have like a summary of services. And this will talk about what are the proposed minutes or the actual providers going to do and see your child for how long, always on the front page. How I've done it previously, and I'm not sure how my current district's going to do it because I haven't sat through one of their IEP meetings yet. Usually we talk about minutes halfway through. I've also seen them talked about like very first thing. I find it to be helpful to come back to them and be like, here's what we're talking about. We're going to talk through what those services actually are and then come back to talk about why they are the amount that they are. I digress. So I think that's also, sorry, I mentioned something and I'm going to take a pause here. It's important to note that the IEP that you are coming into is a draft. This is not something that is finalized. Schools cannot make a decision about your child's services without you present. So this is always, always, always going to be a draft and something that you can have open conversations about with the whole team. That is the point of an IEP meeting, is to collaborate and get everybody's input on their child services. You want to hear voices from everybody, because that's how we're going to make the best choices, is when we're considering all points of view when it comes to your child services. And so, yeah, but it is a draft. It is subject to change. And that's why we have these meetings, is to discuss those changes.
And I will say, just to kind of add on to that, two things. One, I think we forgot to say this up top. We are speaking specifically about the IEP process in the state of Missouri.
Yes.
We've said this in the other episodes of this series, but we forgot to say it today.
If you have made it this far in the series, we live in Missouri.
Yep.
And so for better or for worse, the only way that we know how to do IEPs is in the state of Missouri. Granted, there are legal overarching themes that go nationally. However, we are speaking to the way that things are done in Missouri, because that's what we know, baby. We are the show me state. So,
yes,
Missouri.
That's one thing. And then the second thing, and we can talk about this kind of later down the line, IEP teams cannot usually make decisions about your child's education without the parent present.
Unless.
So
you're so right.
Yeah,
I totally forgot about this.
Yeah, and this is kind of an unfortunate, this is an unfortunate part of this process that can be a little bit uncomfy to talk about, just because I think and correct me if I'm wrong here, Francie, with the initial IEP, it cannot be held without parent or guardian present. Is that correct? Because they have to sign for initiation of services.
I've actually had this happen.
Yeah.
So backing up even further, there are circumstances in which you can have an IEP held without the parents present, and it is after multiple attempts, usually 2 attempts. And it's upon the second attempt of trying to hold the meeting that if the parents are not present, that we can go ahead and hold the meeting without the parents. Usually this is pretty exigent circumstances, or this is something that the team is aware about, that maybe parents just aren't super involved, or maybe, things happen, right?
Right.
Anyways.
This is the part that makes it uncomfy to talk about, especially with other parents, because we have both experienced parents that are very difficult to get a hold of, very difficult to get to come into the school, very difficult to get their input. And I'm not placing a moral qualifier on that. I'm not saying the reason for that, but the fact of the matter is that we have both had this experience where and so Francie said 2 attempts. That will usually be we will phone call, email, send a letter home, sometimes all 3 of those things, to try and get one meeting on the books. If we cannot get a hold of the guardian, we'll go ahead and schedule it, send home a notification of hey, we scheduled it, hope to see you there. We will hold it, get the entire team there, and wait. And if the parent does not attend, we can't hold it that first time. So we'll say, okay, everyone's here, but parent didn't show up, so we're going to give them another notification. We're going to schedule it for give them at least 10 days.
I was going to say, it's a minimum of 10 days.
Yeah.
So you have to have a minimum of 10 days notice before an IEP meeting. And usually if best practice is to give them more than 10 days.
Yep. And so then it's kind of that same scheduling process of call home, send emails, send messages through, Seesaw or whatever the school. There's lots of classroom messaging apps. Go ahead and schedule the meeting. If after all of those notifications, the parents don't attend the second scheduled meeting, then the IEP team can go ahead and hold it, as long as they have already gotten permission at some point to initiate services, special education services.
That's where I'm going with this, is because I've had this happen before, where we had gotten a hold of them. We had scheduled it at the eligibility. They had been present at the eligibility. We scheduled the day or the meeting at the eligibility meeting. Week ahead, called, hey, we have a meeting coming up. It's on this day. We're excited to see you and talk about your student. Cool, whatever. Day before, called again. Hey, we know this meeting's coming up. We're so excited to see you. Are you coming? Yes, we're coming. Hang up. Day shows up. They no show. Keep in mind, we will call you multiple times. If you just forget, that's okay. We're going to call you like 4 or 5 times and be like, hey, we have this meeting today. Hope to see you here. Call us back. Let us know. It's not going to happen without us multiple times trying to contact you. So anyways, for my particular situation, called several times, waited 30, 45 minutes, no showed. We put another date on the schedule, or we scheduled another date, contacted parents, said, hey, this is the time, this is the place. We hope to see you here. We missed you the first time. Please come. Second time rolled around, same situation. Same thing with the 5 days ahead contact, day before contact, and day of. Like it just, it wasn't happening. And so this was an initial. And so we held the initial without the parents present and sent home the signature form. So when you're starting initial services, you have to get a signature that say like, I am consenting for my child to receive services. We sent the paper home and they sent it back. So
there you go.
We started services.
Yes. And I've had a similar experience happen where we never got permission to start services. And so we had made it all the way through the process that we have discussed up until this point, got to the time of the IEP, had written the IEP, had written goals, everything, and then did the 2 meetings, could not get a hold of the guardian, and sent home the prior written notice for permission, and never got it back. So we were not able to initiate services for that kid, and that is unfortunate. But yeah, so I did want to note, like, because I don't want it to, I think that it can sometimes be hard for parents and guardians to know exactly what their their role in the process is, I suppose. And so it is not 100% accurate to say we will like never make a decision without your input. Most of the time we won't. 99% of the time we will not.
Barring you not showing up for the meeting 2 times in a row, we will not make a decision without you present. That is like, that's a very good caveat because it doesn't happen frequently. Like I have not had it happen exceptionally, and it's so normal. Please mind, it's so normal to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was today. That's fine. You can hang out on the phone with us like that. We can do this meeting over the phone. You don't have to show up in person. That's fine. We're gonna find a way. It's normal to forget things, but it's when we have multiple meetings in a row, and we want to keep your kids in services, that we will go ahead and hold it without parents present or guardians present. Unfortunate. It does happen. That is a special caveat.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make with it is like that is legal. Like the school is allowed to do that.
They're going to do that if
they're going to do that. And it is because ultimately like we've gone through this entire process and gotten the permissions that we have needed to get, gone through this whole process to establish this child. And again, we talked about this in Missouri, this child will fail without intervention. And so like, then as the school, okay, we've determined this. So we can't just say like, all right, well, never mind. Like, guess they'll fail. No, like it has to, like we as a school are then going to intervene. So, but yeah, that doesn't happen a lot.
No.
And ideally
we want you to be there. Yeah, we want you to be there. That's the other side of thing. We want you here. And so, largely does not happen frequently, but if it does, then the school can go ahead and hold the meeting without you, so long as that they've established that it's been held 2 times and they've done the proper documentation to show that like, no, haven't been here 2 times. We need to hold this meeting without you. Yep. I digress. In the IEP, the services that we are agreeing upon, I'm thinking through kind of the components, the major components that we talk about in IEP. We always start with the present level, which is a summary of what your child is currently doing. These can, and Megan and I've had a big long conversation about it this week, these can sometimes read a little mean if they are not written strengths-based. But there is a balance between strengths-based and deficits-based writing. And so this is a tangent. I'm so sorry. Basically, this is what is centered in the writing when we're talking about your students' achievement. Are we centering what their strengths are? Are we centering what their deficits are? There is a balance between the two. Unfortunately, and I know we've talked about it in the past, a lot of times these documents are written to be deficits based because we have to highlight the gap in or the gap in ability to qualify services or to justify the services, which sucks. But yeah, the present level talks about everything that your child um, is currently doing in all of the areas that usually that you tested in. I feel like I see a lot of times for initials, a lot of the information that's on the eligibility and the red kind of comes over to be in the present level of the IEP that first go around. As you go forward, that will change every year to talk about what your child is presently doing from the past IEP cycle or the past calendar year. Um, let's see here. I'm trying to think else. What else happens in the present level?
Yeah, well, I was wondering if we could talk about strengths-based versus deficits-based a little bit more, just because
Absolutely.
we did talk about it last episode, but I think that this is something that is kind of buzzy right now in the world of special education. People are talking about it a lot. It's becoming more and more popular and preferred to write things with a strengths focus. But I think we can chat about the reason why, because it's not just that deficits based is mean.
No, excellent point, Maggie. So once again, if we think about our little bell curve going like hauling back to our stats episode, if you have strengths based and deficit based on like either side of our like spectrumy here, once again, the truth is somewhere in the middle there, and having a balance of those is oftentimes what paints the best picture of our child. That being said, too much strengths based is a bad thing, and too much deficits is a bad thing. It should only write to what a child cannot do, or is sometimes does not paint the full picture of the child. We did just have a conversation about this, like right before we started filming. That was really
right
apt to
before
this,
we
actually.
started recording.
No, and so to paint only what they can't do does not paint the full picture of the child. And on the converse side of things, only talking about things that they are doing can sometimes mislead, can be a little misleading about how significant deficits or delays can be. And so there has to be, in my opinion, a balance between the two to be able to paint the full picture of what the child is and is not doing in order to understand exactly where they are and exactly how we should move forward.
Yeah.
And I've seen both sides.
Yes, I have too. And this has been something that I personally have had a hard time with as a professional, just because I've heard from parents both. Like I've heard parents say like it is so heartbreaking to sit there and hear all the deficits. It's so heartbreaking to sit and hear like your child's not doing this, they're delayed in this, they're deficient in this. But then I've also heard sometimes even the same parent saying like, oh, like I go to the school for the IEP meeting and the team says they're doing awesome, but like I'm not seeing, you know, these improvements at home, or like I'm not seeing what they're talking about. And like I feel like they're just saying my student's doing so well just to be nice, you know? And so,
or even I've heard it where they're saying, well, they're making all this progress and you're talking about how good they're doing, but they're still 3 grade levels behind. Like, I don't understand. It feels like you're lying to me.
totally.
And that's not what we want either. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why I bring up like, we don't want to write strengths-based stuff because deficits-based is mean. That's not the reason for this shift. The reason is because deficits-based is not entirely accurate. So like we are getting, as a professional, if I receive a eval document or an IEP that is just student did not meet this milestone, student had not met this education standard, student is not. I'm like, okay, well, what are they doing? Because then that gives me nothing to build off of when I'm writing goals for them or when I'm thinking about kind of what is the next thing down the line. Because if I'm just seeing all the stuff that they're not doing, I'm like, well, then what the heck? Like, what does this kid even look like? How are they communicating? How are they learning? How are they sitting in the classroom? So it is, we have to have those strengths, or at least just like statements of what it is that they actually are doing, to be able to get a good idea of, get a good and accurate picture of the student themselves.
No, I completely agree with that. I've been going through this a lot personally with like having to write IEPs. Every school, we talked about it previously, every school does things differently, and I'm currently learning the way that my new district is doing it, and it's different than how I've done it in the past. And so trying to wrap my head around how can we paint the most accurate picture within, considering both the pluses and the minuses. It just makes it easier to make clinical decisions when you can consider both. Both have to be considered. So
Yeah.
agreed with that completely.
I think the opposite pitfall, like you were saying, is like, oh, the team says he's doing so awesome, but like he's still 3 grade levels behind. And I think that is just a hard part of this job and of like being in this field where we are working with disability, we are working with deficit, and like that is but we're not mean people. We want to be nice. We don't want you as a parent or caregiver to feel like your child is failing constantly. And so I think the opposite pitfall is it can be kind of like candy coating or sugar coating it a little bit. And that's also not fair to the guardian, because you're not getting an accurate picture. So this is a very soft skill.
It is. It really is. There has to be a level of nuance when we have these conversations, because it happens every year. We're going to do this every year. And we need to have nuance when we're discussing the fact that, yes, we know that we have deficits and delays, but also I want to talk about what they are doing, because there's so much that we can focus on in both to make sure that we're moving towards closing that gap in skills, but also celebrating all the progress that we've made. You have to have that balance and that nuance to be able to really have honest conversations about progress that we're making. So.
And you never want to get to the point with IEPs, especially for kids that have a developmental disability of some kind where they are always going to need some form of special education. You never want to get to the point where, okay, now they're 16, we're talking about transition out of high school, we're talking about what life as an adult is going to look like, and all of a sudden parents get hit with a lot of things that, like, they're going to need supports for a job, they'll need supports for independent living, they'll need supports for X, Y, and Z. But up until then, it had been this really rosy view of, well, they're doing so great, they're meeting their goals, which like may totally be true, but it is maybe not a 100% accurate of like,
You're speaking to something that is something you and I both dealt with a lot, specifically when it comes to life skills style education for students with significant support needs. And so that's one of the fascinating things about IEPs, is that it really does cover a broad spectrum of disability, because you have everything from you need the most support for ADLs, activities of daily living. You need the most support for academic accommodations. You're doing functional academics or life skills training, all the way down to just very minor reading support or whatnot. And so it's also kind of hard when Maggie and I are trying to summarize what an IEP meeting is, because it looks very different per child. That makes sense. It's the I part of the IEP. It's the individualized part. And so we're trying to paint with pretty broad strokes here, but this is very different. And an IEP meeting, it will be very different for people depending upon where they're at on that disability spectrum. And so never want to minimize anybody's on either end of that spectrum's experience, but we're making pretty broad strokes here because it is such a unique and individualized experience, really.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry. I think I have gotten us a little bit off track, but this is, I think, something that you and I have talked about, because it is a tough part. It is a tough line to walk of like, we want to be accurate, but we don't want to be so focused on the deficits, so focused on the disability that we miss the whole child.
Absolutely.
We want to be like kind and sympathetic to parents, but we also don't want to be, telling them things that aren't true, or painting a picture prognostically that's also not true. So it's
absolutely,
it's tough.
It is tough, and I hope by having these conversations in a format like we are right now helps kind of convey to the people who don't actively work in this field how much we're thinking about this. We are always considering this disability is such a multifaceted issue, and I feel like the IEP is kind of the like setting in which that multifaceted disability is held for so many years of this child's life, right? And so it is complex and nuanced and so twisty and turny. And so we think about this so much. And so, yeah, we never want to focus on just one aspect of a multifaceted child, which is why writing to both strengths and deficits is how we're going to best capture all of those little intricacies of your child.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
anyways, because with that too, not just with strengths-based, one of my favorite parts of the IEP that we talk about is the strengths of the child. We have a dedicated section to talk about strengths of your child, and I love writing a strengths section.
Francis, you slay the strength section. Like
I love a strengths section.
when we worked together, past tense, so sad. When we worked together and we would both serve speech and language, sometimes Francie and I would have a student that had really high minutes, which we'll talk about later too, service minutes. And so we would split those, which also I feel like worked out because Francie and I both have different strengths as professionals too. So to have both of us working on an IEP to service communication minutes was really great. But then we would both wind up.
Oh yeah, no, it was a really fun power team. We
loved
it.
It was awesome. We would both wind up in the IEP meeting and adding information to that same document. And I would scroll on down to the strength section and be like, all right, ready to like talk about how, creative this kid is. I love playing imaginative games with them or whatever. And I would get in and Francie's written this absolutely beautiful, like 2 or 3 sentences that is so accurate, so truthful and complimentary and glowing of this student, because we love these kids. We love the kids that we work with, and they are like our little buddies sometimes. And so it is fun to get to like brag on them and use that spot to talk about like what we love about this child and what makes them so special. And Francie, you like kill it every time.
I love it because this is the section where we get to talk about things that make them them. And once again, going back to what we just talked about with being multifaceted, we had just gone through this whole present level where maybe we're talking about things that they're really struggling with. And now we get to talk about things where they really shine. And that can be things that are extracurricular to academics. Maybe that's things like they have a really awesome sense of humor. Maybe it's things like they're incredibly artistic. They're incredibly resilient. Like this is the place where we really get to talk about your child as a person. And I love that stuff. I eat it up. I do think it's important. One of my pet peeves about a strength section when we have a child who has complex needs is when they just write, they have a beautiful smile. Think harder about it, professionals. My God. That's my hot take is that if you're working with a child with complex needs and you write anything about their beautiful smile, no, try again. Try again. They have so much more going on. Oftentimes like, oh yeah, you working with a kid, oh, they've got this knowing like look in their eyes and they have an incredible sense of comedic timing, or just having a really deep sense of care for their peers. Maybe they're a really great example student. Like I've had kids, speech only kids, who are like my rocks in therapy sessions where I'm like, they are the kid that I know I can pair other kids with because they are such a great example, or they are such a strong, hard worker. They're a calming presence in the speech room. Like I love talking about a strength section. And so,
yes.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And I think about so many times students are like the bright spot in our day. And so getting to really brag on them, especially students that we have had the fortune of working with for like multiple school years. This last year that we both worked at the same school was both of our 3rd year. And so some of those students we had on our caseloads for 3 years. And so I remember some of the strength sections were like, thinking back to when I started seeing them in, 3rd grade or whatever, and now they're at the end of 5th grade. In that strength section, I will put like, this is some maturity and like growth that I have seen in this student, because having that kind of longitudinal look at like how they have matured is really important too. And that's such a valuable thing that you don't always get in other settings.
That's not only that you don't get in other settings, but that's something that I am like selfishly guarding as a speech path. We get to follow the kids. We get to be with them year after year after year after year. And so I love the rapport that we get to build because you don't always get that. Classroom teachers change every year. Sometimes sped teachers change every year. Sometimes they're assigned based off grade, but usually speech therapists and OTs and PTs get to be with a kid for a long period of time. And so you really get to see like just the beauty of them growing up. Oh my gosh. I'm thinking about a particular student who I had started in kindergarten. And they were, the strength section then was about how motor driven they were and how much they learned by exploring. And by the time that our time together had ended, they had become a really like leader in their classroom, and like a great like older sibling type for the younger children in their room. And it was really just beautiful to watch that transition. And so I love a strength section. It changes every year. And that's my like, that's when I feel like we get to really talk about the child shining as a person.
Yeah.
And so, oh, I love it.
Yeah. I want to just like reiterate what you said to other professionals. Like if you are writing something about like the child's appearance or whatever, it's like, think harder, be a little more creative.
Oh my gosh, you have a person in front of you.
Like, this is whole person.
This is me calling out other professionals. If in your strength section you work with kids with complex needs who maybe have mobility impairments or maybe have different bodies, differently abled bodies, and you talk about the way that they smile, I'm gonna pull my hair out. They are people. They do so many other things besides smile. For the love of God, notice them and talk about it. I don't typically get snippy with other professionals. That is one thing I will get snippy over. We're talking about a whole person over here. Notice them. Like they've got personalities, they've got wants, they've got interests, they've got so many other things going on. They have a beautiful smile. Shut up. So that's me getting aggressive about it.
Get him, Francie. Yeah. Totally. Oh, that made me think of something. I don't remember what it was. We get really pigeonholy with like, it has to be an academic strength. Oh, this is what it was. One of my favorite strengths that I like to put in is and this is, I will also include other things about the student because this is not really about them, but if the student has a strong support system at home, that is a strength.
Oh, huge strength.
So if this is parents that we have a really good relationship with that are super responsive, that have been very involved and very like communicative, and we know that they are following through on some of the things that we're working on at home, that is a huge boon to that child, right? Like that is such a strength, not necessarily of like them and their personality, but of their situation. That's a strength because having that strong support system is really huge. So that's something that I will include sometimes too, if I just personally have noticed it as like a really big piece of the picture. Not to say that if I don't include it, as if like people listening to this are reading my IEPs, but like not to say that if I don't include it, it's not there. But sometimes that's a standout thing that I will make sure I note in that strength section too. So
absolutely. Absolutely. That
love a strength section.
We love a strength section. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The next section that you will typically talk about won't be talked about at the initial, which is the changes in current functioning. That obviously doesn't matter for an initial because there are no changes. However, year after year, this will be where you talk about what progress did they make or what progress didn't they make. Sometimes you don't make progress on a goal. And let's talk about why and what should happen next. After that section is something called, for Missouri, once again, Mo, we talk about if a student is MAP A eligible. We have a standardized test for the state of Missouri called the MAP test. For our students who have intellectual disabilities or who would not be a good candidate and would otherwise qualify for the adapted version of the MAP test, which is tests based on their objectives in their IEP goals, which we'll get to next or later. That is when we would talk about why we were taking the MAP A as opposed to the bigger MAP test. That is, once again, child dependent. Not every child is MAP A eligible.
I am pretty sure that to be eligible for the adapted MAP test, that again is based on that child's IEP goals and not on state learning standards, I think that you do have to qualify as intellectually disabled. I think that that's a part of it. I could be wrong.
I remember if you can do it with just autism. That's the thing. I don't know if it's also like, it has to be like, I don't know if you need an adaptive score to be like, no, we have this and also adaptive. I don't know that for certain. I never do map testing, so I'm not the one.
Yeah, let's look it up. But
Be the one.
because it is important to note that like this is just kind of like a little box that they'll check to say like, yeah, they're getting an entirely different test. So kids that have IEPs, there is a whole section for when they take standardized district or state testing, they are allowed accommodations and modifications. So that's not this. MAP-A is something totally different. Accommodations and modifications are discussed later in the IEP document. So this would be something like if they have to test in a separate room, if they need more frequent breaks, or if they can spread out testing over multiple sessions, that kind of thing, to help with attention, help with sensory needs, motor needs, that kind of thing, that those accommodations are discussed later.
I have found the MAP-A determination checklist.
All right. What do we got?
Eligibility criteria to be able to take the Missouri Alternative Assessment. Has a student been evaluated and found to be eligible under IDEA? Yes or no? The student demonstrates the most significant cognitive disabilities and limited adaptive skills. I knew there was an adaptive component.
Yep.
Limited adaptive skills that may be combined with physical or behavioral limitations. Yes or no? So it's one of those or ands. If you remember from our last episode, sometimes the way that Missouri writes their eligibility criteria are you have to have this and or this and, or that. So they have to have determined cognitive abilities falling within the most significant cognitive disability ranges as evidenced by a standardized assessment, or they have been determined to have cognitive abilities falling within the most significant disability range as evidenced by pervasive supports, and they demonstrate adaptive skills, which are like our skills to be able to dress ourselves, go to the restroom, time management. I'm trying to think of what other like adaptive skills.
Feeding and eating. It's really like, it is really anything that you do throughout the day to exist as a person in a school or society setting. I mean, adaptive skills is a huge category. Massive.
Shout out to my OTs. They do a lot with adaptive skills. So you have to have cognitive abilities, maybe not tested, but also significant adaptive needs. Number 3, the most significant cognitive disability impacts their ability to access curriculum and require specialized instruction. So are they receiving pretty high level SPED stuff for that? This will the number 4 is that their cognitive disability will impact their post-school outcome. So are these children who are going to go on to need job skills training? Maybe they will need to go on and do some type of assisted living. Maybe they will need support beyond the school setting. Then there's like an additional factors to consider. So people who are taking the MAP-A are our children who oftentimes have the highest of support needs. So not every child qualifies for it. We've had children previously qualify and then not qualify for MAP-A. It changes.
Right, which I think that is, so MAP-A, qualifying for MAP-A is not common. Qualifying and then unqualifying I think was
common.
I would go so far to say as there was a mistake made in that child's testing early on.
All this to say, MAP-A, if you had a child that would qualify for MAP-A, this is the section that we would start talking about it. There are forms for students who are not MAP-A eligible to talk about the regular MAP test later in the IEP. So if you have a student who is of 3rd grade and older, then you will have an extra form to talk about the MAP test. But this special section is just for the adapted MAP test. So
yes. I was yippity yapping about that while you were looking up the criteria. But yeah, so we've gone over. Oh, let's touch briefly on changes in current functioning and what happens if your child is not meeting their goals.
Yes. So if they are not meeting their goals, or somehow the goal, regardless of something happened, the goal was not met. There are, in my brain, this is how I address this. And I don't know if this is the way that everybody addresses this. That usually means to me that either something was wrong with how I wrote the goal, either it was too difficult, it was a skill that we weren't ready to target, or so on. And so usually that will be met with a new goal addressing either similar things or prerequisite skills to be able to get us up to where we were. I would never, and I think it's pretty commonly held, to just keep going with the same goal. Like, I feel like it's usually like if we didn't meet it, we need to edit the goal somehow. That being said, you can target similar skills year over year in different aspects, but we got to change the way the goal is written because something happened in the way that it was written and the way that we track the data that was not successful for your child.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is pretty common for a goal to be written in an IEP and for a child to not meet it. And like you were kind of getting at, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the first things that I will look at when I'm like writing changes and being like, oh, they did not meet this goal. One of the first things I look at was like, well, did I write the goal poorly? Like, I'll go back and be like, was this a badly written goal? Because sometimes it is totally on me, the way that I wrote it. Sometimes even just semantically, the way that I goal as written, they haven't met it because I, Maggie, wrote the goal in a stupid way. And I've owned up to that in meetings before and said like, goal as written, they didn't meet it because I messed up. That happens sometimes because we're all learning and growing and we all develop over time. And I don't write goals the way that I used to because this has happened. Another reason why is kind of what you were saying is we were targeting a skill that had some kind of prerequisite skills that hadn't been met yet. And so that skill is actually kind of too high of a reach. It's too big of a lift for the kid at this time. I've had that happen too if it's a new student that comes in and I just don't know them very well. We talk about this big long process, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually not a ton of time for us to get a really like intimate look at what kind of skills that they have unless we do a full-blown evaluation. So yeah, sometimes if I get a new kid on my caseload and I just haven't had a ton of time to get to know them, I'll say like, well, this is a skill that's missing, so let's work towards that. And usually if it gets to the point where like they haven't met the goal in the IEP, I noticed that a while ago, and we've actually been working on those prerequisite skills this whole time. But then we get to the meeting and I am explaining this now.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about it more when we get to goals about what makes a good goal. Because there are ways, and there's an acronym. Of course, there's an acronym. It's SMART, SMART, as to what makes a good goal. Another thing with how a goal is written that might be impacting your child's ability to meet the goal. Sometimes we pick an accuracy level that's too high. There are times where, specifically with my kids who have higher support needs, I will write this is the, sorry, I'm trying to think about which acronym it is. The A, is it attainable?
Yeah, achievable or attainable. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll write the accuracy level too high. So will they do this skill with 80% accuracy? And maybe they're consistently getting the highest accuracy that they can, which is like 75. And I wrote the goal too high. And so all things to think about and consider when we're writing these goals. And Maggie kind of touched on it earlier, but these are things that we're writing for a year out. So we're having to predict how much progress do we think we can make in a year. And sometimes I overshoot. It happens.
Yeah, it totally happens. So there's a lot of reasons why a kid won't meet a goal. A lot of times it's because the goal was written poorly or because we're targeting something that we shouldn't be targeting yet. Sometimes it is because the student was absent too much. Sometimes it's because, and frankly, sometimes it is just the nature of disability. They didn't meet the goal because of the disability. And that is an unfortunate piece of it, because it's, again, it kind of falls into that, like, this is uncomfy. And there's a piece of that, like, maybe the goal was poorly written. The attainable piece of it was, not there.
And how you're going to determine that is every special education and related service provider's favorite thing, which is data. One of the most important things that you're going to hear a lot in IEP meetings is the data. Show me the data. I have the data that supports blah, 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 blah. We are collecting data on your child constantly.
Yep.
That is not just how they perform in therapy sessions or how they're performing on a specific task. That's also data like attendance. That's also data like behaviors. We are constantly collecting data. And so just from my own experience, I can show that, like, we didn't meet this goal. However, every single time that I went to take data on this goal, they were maybe crawling under the table and pitching a fit the whole time. So I don't have data on the school because of this. Or maybe, I've also had it happen specifically over winter where I'm supposed to take data on a child these 3 times and they were sick the whole time. And so I don't have a ton of data to support the progress because they've been gone this time, or maybe we've had snow days or things like that. And so data is what drives a lot of our decisions during the IEP meetings, and sometimes the data doesn't exist due to
extenuating.
Sure, we'll go there.
I think you can also say exigent. Oh,
I know.
Absolutely.
Oh dear. We're gonna move past
buffering.
This. I'm buffering, guys.
Okay,
so data.
Data. We talked about why goals might not be met sometimes. Mm-hmm. I have worked on teams where some members will say like it is unacceptable for goals to not be met on an IEP, and I think that is just not realistic. I think that sometimes in life we don't meet our goals. That's part of it. Should all of the goals be unmet? No, then there's something wrong with the goals.
Yeah.
Like there's something wrong with there's a bigger issue here that's not being addressed if none of the goals were met. And maybe it's behavior, maybe it's attendance, maybe it's illness, maybe it's the goals were bad. One
of the things that I think kind of stresses professionals out when we are doing IEPs is that they give us very thin margins for error. And one of the things that is unfortunately true about all of us here is that we are human. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be a little bit of give for the fact that like sometimes we write bad goals. We shouldn't do it all the time, and it should not be a consistent thing, but sometimes something happens and the goal, it just has a really the measurability is just not there or whatnot. Yeah. There's human illness, right? There's another like downfall and pitfall of being a human. So we have to have a little bit of give. I understand that that's not preferable and it should not happen year over year and it should not happen with every goal. However, give us some grace.
For sure. Okay, so we talked about present level, changes, strengths. Mm-hmm. I'm going out of order here, but then we touch on map A for a little bit. Do you want to get to like the meat of the sandwich, which is goals?
Let's do it.
All right.
We love a goals section. So this is the meat and potatoes of an IEP. These are the things that we are promising to work on with your child for the next calendar year. Or until they meet the goals. Sometimes they meet them early, in which case we will amend, love that. We love it when that happens.
Yeah.
So this is the meat and potatoes. So we will look at where they are at and where we want them to go, and we will write things that we want to work on with them for the next year in order to achieve those goals. And so that can be in whatever area that they need help in. And so for us, it's speech and language therapy. Surprise, surprise. However, if you have kids who have high support needs, this might be daily living tasks. That might be things like brushing your teeth. This might be things like folding or sitting in a chair. Mm-hmm. Had that happen too. This could be things for children on the other end of the spectrum. This could be working on things like decoding and reading fluency or, defining vocabulary, math broadly. Once again, not a speech math pathologist.
Right.
But, so we will write them to what your kid needs. Mm-hmm. And then we'll talk about them. And then we're going to ask you if you're okay with that.
Yes. And I think that this section, a lot of times for parents can feel kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. And then at the end, the team is like, are you okay with that? And they're like, what? Like you just rattled off 15 things and so many percentages. And it was 4 of you talking and like, what the heck?
There's so many numbers,
I guess. Yeah.
Why are there so many numbers? So yeah, a good goal. And we're going to talk to you about what we write our goals to, which is something called SMART, SMART, right? Mentioned it earlier. And so in order to better understand the crazy amount of words that we're going to rattle off on you, I think it's going to be important for Maggie and I to talk through what it means to write a SMART goal so that we are able to better tell you why they sound like this, because no human talks like this. I'm going to be so real about that. No human talks like how we write SMART goals. So
it's very jargony, very legalese, very unnatural.
Yes, very unnatural. And so to write a goal that is SMART, it has to be specific. We have to plan effectively with specific targets in mind. So we are writing something to a very specific goal. It has to be measurable. We have to talk about the ways that we're going to track our progress and how we're going to evaluate the way that the child is doing, or we're going to have to quantify how they're doing on the goal. It has to be attainable. Mentioned this earlier with I'm not going to write something that is like way out of reach skill wise. Maybe I'm not going to like hop, skip, and jump a couple skills down the road when we're working here. I'm going to write it to be within, there's another technical term, the zone of proximal development. I want to be just outside of what they're currently doing so that we're able to make that forward progress, right? Has to be relevant. I'm not going to write a goal for something that is not actively serving a purpose for their education, right? It has to be relevant. And it has to be timely. We have to have a deadline and an end point for this goal, right? So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. And because we need all of those things, we write goals and we talk about goals in a very specific way. So your goals are going to sound very jargony because they have to consider all of those things that we're writing to.
Yeah.
And so we've written goals all over the spectrum, actually. Anything from just single sounds all the way up to functional communication. Like, are we, communicating anything for any purpose? So anyways, it's going to be tailored. These goals will be tailored to your child. And it's going to be a lot. And then they're going to, seriously, at the end, do you have any questions about that? Yes.
Yeah.
And also ask questions.
Yes.
If you get there and you're like, why 70%? I will tell you why. Ask those questions, babe, because it's a lot of words being fire hosed at you at once. So
totally. Yeah. And at the end of the IEP meeting, they should ask if you want to have 10 days to think about what you've just heard. And really what it is like, I feel like this is like when you go to a really fancy restaurant and you order like a bottle of wine or something, and they come out and they give you a little taste of it, and then you taste it while the person is standing right there and you go, good. Like, that might be a niche experience. I don't know. But
that's actually so accurate.
It feels like this is like my analogy for that. So what it is like the 10 days at the end that they're like, oh, you can sign off on this IEP and say, yes, we like it. We want you to implement this tomorrow or the next school day. Or like, no, give me 10 days to think about it. Let me talk to my partner about it. Let me blah, blah, blah. The purpose of that isn't to say like, do you reject this IEP and want to start completely over? It's like, do you want to think about it, process these goals? That gives you time. Like, if you have questions, you can call up and talk to the case manager about like, hey, why was this goal 70%? Like, or I was thinking about it and I would maybe love to tweak this a little bit, or like add a goal, or it gives you kind of that like processing time. It's not like a yes, no question. It's more like a think about it, discuss with the child's other guardians, discuss maybe with your advocate or their outside therapist or something like that. So that's kind of what the purpose of that is. So, because I am the person when I'm getting a lot of new information, if people are like, do you have questions? I've started to say to people like, I don't have questions right now because I am a delayed processor. So like, I will process this when I get home. If questions come up, I'll text you, or like I will email you or whatever. But like right now I'm sitting and absorbing and not asking a whole lot, not saying a whole lot. And that's fine.
And that's totally fine. Yeah. It's natural to like be like a deer in headlights after these meetings because you're like, whoa.
Totally.
You get a lot of information thrown at you. Take the time. You are entitled to these 10 days to think about it. Take them. If you just want to think, absolutely. And don't get me wrong. If you get to the end of that and you're like, cool, whatever, happy to sign off and we'll start those services the next day. No worries there. But take those 10 days if you want to and think about it.
And that is the nice part too. You said this earlier, IEPs are a living document. So like if you sign off on the IEP at the meeting, we implement it the next day. That's great. Then like 3 weeks later, you're like, wait, I kind of want to change this goal, or like I had questions about this. You can still call and talk. Like we can still talk about it, or like amendments exist for this reason. You can amend an IEP. Now, I mean, should you be amending an IEP 15 times a school year? No, that is indicating a bigger issue. Like that's indicating something else is going on. But like, yeah, if you have questions and need more or need to talk it out with someone or want to talk more about goals or want to make a change, that is available.
Absolutely. Another section that I recommend parents oftentimes take the time to sit and think about are the accommodations and modifications. Yes, the goals are great to sit and think about. One of the next big things about an IEP is we list out every way that we are changing the education and the environment so that your child can have better access to what they're learning. And this can include so many things. And depending upon your child's need, can be pages long.
Mm-hmm.
And
This
so
can be
this
a
is
pretty
another
bulky section.
this can be a pretty bulky section. It talks about everything from how the content is paced. This can go with how the room is set up. This can go to cover things like how where they sit in the classroom. This can cover
Mm-hmm.
things like how they choose to be reinforced. Like, are they a kid who needs constant reinforcement? Are they somebody who needs positive reinforcement? Are they somebody who needs breaks in order to be reinforced? This is the page, and these are the places that we're talking about how we are changing the school setting and curriculum in order to best support your child. And there's a lot of little details in there that we need to think about. And so, yeah, this is another one that, like, maybe let this one marinate. Think about it. This is not specifically for the addition of things that might be superfluous. This is having to address the disability itself. Sometimes this comes through, and I've had this misinterpreted as we're going to, they really like this teacher, they're going to be with this teacher more. We can't really do that one. This has to be specific to helping to accommodate and modify for their disability due to need for access, not preference all the time. It's about what makes them have the free and appropriate public education. This isn't like a menu that we get to pick from to cater to preferences necessarily.
Yes.
So anyways, important because I have had people be like, oh, well, this? No. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this is another big piece where, like, I feel like if this section is really bulky, that so going all the way back to the beginning of like identifying kids who would be good candidates for special education evaluation. Sometimes kids that like maybe don't have a medical diagnosis, don't have a developmental disability or delay that's very clear cut, but are needing a ton of extra support at school to be able to function in the classroom. That to me says like, we need to get eyes on this kid and we need to evaluate, because even if you have just an amazing teacher who is able to accommodate for their learning needs, able to adjust their environment, able to provide all of these supports, if you suddenly move and that kid does not have any documentation, there is no legal guarantee that they're going to get those same supports in the next school that they go to. And
this
so that, yeah.
This is such an important thing because if you move, we've talked about this before, comparable services.
Yep.
They can offer things that they have, but they're not going to have exactly what your previous district had. Such an important distinction there.
Yes. And so if this is a kid that needs a lot of support to be successful in the classroom and has gone through the process and been evaluated, like this is another, we talked about this a little bit at the end of the last episode, parents not wanting to or being nervous of a diagnosis because of the stigmatization. This is another way to think about it, is that like writing all of this down and getting that kind of label, that identifier, is providing legal protection to make sure they will be successful in whatever public school they attend. It's writing down like, here's what we've determined this child needs. You have to give it to them or at least get as close as reasonably possible, So that's, I think, another big benefit of having an IEP, or a 504 to a lesser extent, but that's a big benefit of having an IEP for a kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a document that goes with them to say this is what they need to be successful and accessing their free and appropriate public education. And it goes with them. So, and they are bound to it, baby, bound to it. Important note, apparently this is the episode where Francie calls out other professionals. Everybody in the school has to follow their accommodations and modifications. This is not an option. If you have an accommodation written into their IEP, first of all, that page is given to the professionals who work with that child so that they are acutely aware of what they need to be successful, and they have to follow it. It is not an option. It is not a choice. This is what they need. This is what we are legally bound to provide. And if you're not, you are violating their rights. Sorry about you.
Yeah.
This is sometimes a battle that we face interprofessionally. And I am kind of tired about being nice about it. This is about access, and this is about this child's right to a free, back to FAPE, baby. This is about FAPE. This is about free and appropriate public education. And if you're not following that, you're violating their rights.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I think that something that kind of goes along with, I actually saw, this was a reel on Instagram, a really good analogy of like, oh, okay, so like we noticed that this child was really struggling in school. Excuse me, they were having a hard time learning to read. They were having a hard time seeing the board, so we got them glasses. But now that they're successful with the glasses, we're going to start weaning them off of the glasses and see if they are able to perform to the same level in school. Some supports are meant to be slowly removed. Some supports are meant to be slowly taken away. This is to like build them up to a certain skill, build stamina for something, for example. Some supports are meant to be faded. Some supports are meant to be there so that this child can successfully participate. And so, yeah, this is directed at other professionals. If you are thinking, oh, well, like this is a crutch, they're just using this as like a leg up, this isn't fair. Wrong. Stop it. Like, think back to the example of like, they were doing really poorly in school until they got their glasses. So we're going to try and slowly wean them off of those glasses. How ridiculous does that sound, right? Like, for some accommodations and modifications in an IEP, that those supports are not meant to be faded. That's what that sounds like when you're not providing that for that student. That's what you sound like.
So. And then on the flip side of things, this is seriously, Francie calls out other professionals. On the flip side of things, if they have breaks written into their IEP and you abuse that because you don't want to deal with them because they're disabled, I think you're a bad person. So sorry. That's the other thing where they're like, oh, will you take them? He's got breaks. Ma'am, he's fine. Leave him alone. I don't know. She's sitting there. She's fine. Please, for the love of God. Like, they're a person too. They are, and I feel like I've said this a lot recently where I'm like, they are just a disabled child. They are not a wild animal. Quit treating them like that.
Oh, girl.
Oh my God. Sorry. And it specifically came down to like, well,
yeah,
like, he can be out of the classroom. She can be out of the classroom. Okay. But if it's like, if there's no reason and it's not like, it's not actively supporting them, like if they're not in a period of escalation or they're not in a point where they've like met their max and they need to take a break, you're just giving them a break because you don't want to deal with them right now. That is violating FAPE again. And we are once again back to FAPE, people. We are back to FAPE. Stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as I talk up the legal protections, these things have to be followed, yada, yada, yada. That is all true. In practice, mistakes get made and oversights happen. And sometimes people just don't do their jobs well. And like, I'm speaking as a person who has made mistakes. I am like speaking as a person who has not adhered to an IEP because I was unaware. And so once you know better, you have to do better for these kids. So like, if it's something like, oh, you're so right, I read his accommodations at the beginning of the year and I completely forgot about this one. Like, I haven't been providing that accommodation for him in speech. As soon as I know about it, I'm changing my behavior to make sure that it's implemented. Mistakes happen. What is not okay is kind of what Francie is, I think, getting at, of like manipulating supports in the IEP to make your life easier to the detriment of the student. That is unacceptable. And yeah, that's it. Unacceptable,
that's it.
Period.
Yeah, like, no, mic drop. Sorry, it's not happening. Yeah, no, there's always, and obviously nuance. There's always room for human error. Don't get me wrong. And there's also room for forgiveness there. If you change your behavior the second time, great. If this becomes a pattern, I got eyes on you, okay?
Francis coming for you.
I'm coming for you in the night. I'm in your house. Like, you're not providing vape. Like,
You jump out from a closet. You're not providing vape.
I'm so serious about this, guys. Oh my gosh. Anyways,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
because
not to
it
be
is serious.
it is serious. And I shouldn't have to this is soapbox getting pulled out.
Get it
I
out.
shouldn't have to beg you for this. This is something that we should all be agreed upon, that we want to provide children with the supports that they need to be successful. And yes, it is sometimes a little bit more steps for our children who need more support. We should all be on the same page that they deserve that. Human dignity is kind of like not a controversial topic, in my opinion. And so when it becomes one, I'm like, for the love of God, guys, please pull it together.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I feel like that goes along with our IEP conversation, because we have some people, and it just happens specifically within education, that are just kind of resistant for some of our kids with disabilities. I don't think that's cool.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think, gosh, this is like, we have truly wandered into like a completely different topic of conversation.
Truly.
But I am okay with that, because I think that this is something that like,
and it goes back to the IEP, because we have a document. We have this legally binding document, guys. And this is here to protect this child and provide to them what they are entitled to.
Mhm.
And so the minute that starts getting tread upon or like ignored, I got big problems with it. And so I feel like this is kind of the end of the IEP conversation, is once we've agreed to these services, they have to be followed.
Yeah.
They have to be followed. So
Yeah.
that's my Francie's coming for you
Yeah. Well, and
rant
like
of the day.
absolutely. There are, I think that the reason it's important to have this conversation is because schools are not always a safe place for disabled children. And that breaks my heart to say out loud. But like, you and I have both heard stories and even seen times where kids are not treated with dignity. They are not given the rights that they have been afforded by IDEA to an education because of the actions of adults who either are being willfully or purely ignorant, or are resistant to change because of some idea they have in their head of what this student should be doing. So to other professionals, I say, please try and be as educated as possible. Please try and be as open and flexible as possible for the betterment and for the service of your students.
And if you have questions about it, come talk to us. We, as their SPED team, love talking about these kids. I love these kids. They are the bright spots of my day, of my month, of my week, of my year. Like, I love talking about, and I love talking about accessibility. Like, that's the other side of things. That's all I'm thinking about, guys. So if you have questions as professionals,
Yeah.
I love it when we have these conversations and can talk about it. We want to talk about it with you guys, and we want to find ways that are sustainable for you to make sure that you are providing FAPE for them in whatever setting that you find yourself teaching in. This is collaborative. Going back to that IEP team, as professionals who might not be in the meetings, you're still part of this kids' care team. So let's talk about it. Oh my gosh. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, sometimes these IEPs are hard to implement. Sometimes they are a big old stack of papers. That is a thick document. Sometimes there's a lot. It's a lot to consider. It is a lot to modify. But we have to remember, like, that is it is in the service of the child, right? It's in the service of the student. And so it's okay that it's hard. We're going to do it anyway. And we're going to figure out a way to do it anyway. And
I feel like one of the important notes I want to end on is it's because it's what they're owed. This is a rights issue. This is a inalienable human right issue. You, in the United States, we believe that you are entitled to an education, and you are owed that. The child is owed that. And so when we can get on the
frank, it's one of the few legal rights that children have.
Girl, if you want to get on, that would be a whole episode in and of itself. It is one of the few rights that children have in this nation. They are owed this.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get on the same ground on the fact that like we are all here to support them in that, great. That's where we're at. And that's part of the reason why we have these IEP meetings is so we can get on the same page about what they are owed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, girl. We kind of shifted from, I think at first we started kind of geared towards, hey, if you're a parent in this scenario, here's what you need to know, to talking to other professionals and saying like, hey guys, let's all collectively get it together.
absolutely. And I also, for the parents listening, want you to hear this too, that like there's accountability within the schools too,
Mm-hmm.
that we are making sure that this document is being followed by everybody.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I feel like parents, while you're not here every day and you're not seeing it, you worry about those things. You want to make sure that your kid is being supported as best as possible. And they have this document, but is it being followed? There are people within the school who make sure that that's happening. And so important for everybody to hear and that we're on the same page. We are supporting kids and we have a document that says that we have to, so we will.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that this is a good place to end on. We talked about the goals, accommodations, modifications, a lot of things wrapped up in that. There are other pieces of the IEP that are a little more like ticky-tacky, kind of like very specific case-by-case types of things. We didn't really touch on service minutes, but honestly, I think that that's okay because that is a little bit more of a technical case-to-case type of a deal too. Because every kid's minutes are going to look a little bit different based on what they need and based on kind of where they are currently in their education. So I think this is probably a good place to wrap up our conversation about IEPs because yeah, you and I both know full well we could sit here and rant for 8 or 9 hours about the topic we have just stumbled into because yeah, it's a lot. And maybe we should do a whole separate episode on expectations of other professionals and some of the hard and difficult parts of implementing accommodations in schools and like common pitfalls, things that make this difficult. Because yeah, it's not all like rosy rainbows, just make sure the checklist is followed. Like life is messy. And there's a lot of things that can get in the way of accommodations being provided or get in the way of a child accessing their owed education. But that doesn't mean that we give up, and it doesn't mean that we just say like, well, it's too hard. Not a choice. Like we gotta be flexible. We have to creatively problem solve sometimes. And so that could totally be an episode in itself. Yes, we care deeply about this. We are obviously very passionate about it because it's important and because that we believe that kids deserve communication and they deserve education. So hopefully that did clear up a little bit more of the IEP process for you guys. If there are topics aside from the ones that we've been batting around that you would like to hear from in the future, leave us a comment, DM us on Instagram. We are currently on YouTube at Tell Me About It, an SLP podcast. We are also on Spotify under the same name. And you can find us on Instagram at Tell Me About It SLP.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Yes, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.